This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I'm here with GREG TEFT. How are you, Greg?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Now, we're going to talk about mostly the work that Greg recently did on one of the many, many, many CONSTAR Chronicles episodes. Vance Major released, I think, 51 brand new CONSTAR Chronicle episodes on December 8th, and you can basically binge watch through all of them in about 10 hours, but he released them all on the same day.
Yeah.
And one of them was yours. It was an episode called Shakedown.
That's right, yeah. My first effort for, almost anything. It was quite the experience. I figured I would try to eat that elephant, and I did. It took me a bit longer than I thought I would, but it got
Well, we're going to talk all about that. But first, let's find out a little bit about who GREG TEFT is. So first of all, Greg, where are you from? Where do you live?
I usually just say I'm from New England. I grew up in Connecticut. I now live with my family in Maine, but my office is in Massachusetts. So on any given month, I see 5 states, including Rhode Island or New Hampshire that I drive through on occasion.
That's right, because you have to drive through that tiny little sliver of New Hampshire to get from Maine to Massachusetts.
Either way, if you want to get anywhere on 95, yes. So unless you go through Canada, you have to go through New Hampshire to leave Maine, or take a plane or a boat.
So you've actually been involved with Vance Major for a while, but before that, you were actually involved in some other fan productions, right?
Yeah, actually, everything kind of started at once a little over 4 years ago. One of my hobbies is modeling, scale modeling, and of course, sci-fi and Star Trek scale models. And one of the Vance's friends is in the group, one of the groups that I frequent on Facebook, and he put a casting call up for this production called Starship Republic. So I gave Ray Tessie, emailed Ray Tessie my information, and he got back to me. And long story short, I ended up getting cast for the executive officer for that production. But at the same time, I also met Vance because we were filming in Oklahoma. Vance was very active there at the time during the heyday of Starbase Studios, and we hit it off. And I saw what he was doing, and it impressed me with what he was able to do. I think the first 2 films I saw from him were a couple shorts called Pen Pals, and it was just him and Carly Shivy separately did their little dialogue, they had this little private conversation going between the 2 crews from other the productions that they were involved in. And I'm like, that's really clever. And they did it with their phones. They did it separately, and then, released them in 2 pieces. And it's this is interesting. So while I'm getting involved in Starship Republic, which Ray wanted to have, be glitzy and polished, and we went out there and into Oklahoma, and we did a 10-minute, and then it'll be a 10-minute condensed version of what he wanted his first episode to be. Now, of course, this was before the fan film guidelines, and I also met Vance in person there, and over time we spoke on and off. That's how I actually, through Vance, I made the contact with Jeff Ferguson, and ended up co-hosting his blog and doing interviews with people. So through Vance, I had made all these connections. So when he wanted to start doing his own stuff, I'm like, yeah, count me in. So 3 years ago, I met him for the first time once the sets moved to Arkansas, and we did a little thing called Resistance. He had written my Republic character into a couple things to kind of set up this history and a crossover, which I thought was also a really neat idea that he's done, is getting people involved from different films to kind of coalesce the fan film universe more than just this production and that production. So we had younger Nuno da Silva. I covered the Greys and wore my K0 jersey and set it up his Menard character and I were friends, and his wife was my cousin. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is a really cool idea. So we did those, and we also did a small piece called Resistance, which was the first CONSTAR piece. Actually, maybe that was 2 years ago. was the CONSTAR piece. But it just kind of like snowballed from there. And I'd do voice work for him here and there, and I'd go out, I've gone out once a year to actually film some stuff with him, and it's been a lot of fun.
So how many of the CONSTAR episodes would you say you've been, and let's count Menard in that as well, the Menard saga, because I think that overall Vance has now done 69 different fan films.
Yeah. I was trying to go down through the list, and because there was like so many add-ons and voice pieces, I can only say like 10 for sure that I know I'm in. And if we wanted me to rattle off those 10 titles right now, I couldn't. I didn't think of that until like right at 8 o'clock tonight. I'm like, I should probably know that.
People will have to click on the link to the playlist and then watch everything and look for, GREG TEFT.
They'll have to look for me. Yeah, the dark-haired guy with olive skin from New England. So, yeah, and it was just really neat because, he doesn't focus on having, like, these 15-minute stories. It's like he'll put something together to put two characters together, either in a situation or to discuss a situation and present that. So his work is very much the human condition side of Star Trek. I'm a sci-fi action guy, but I can really respect what he's been trying to do. And, when it came time to think about maybe doing my own, I tried to capture some of that.
Well, that's a good segue into it. So let's talk about Shakedown. And at this point, let's go to the moment where you decided, okay, I want to have some fun too. How did you come to that decision, and then how did you bring it up to Vance?
So Vance and I have talked and kind of collaborated on ideas for random scenes, either something that's going to go as an after credits or something that's going to be part of something that will end up getting stitched together. So after we had a bunch of these, he came to me and he said, hey, do you want to write a scene for Data? And like the next day he called me up, hey, do you want to write a scene for Beverly? And I'm like, well, you know what? Let me take those and put some stuff around it. And that way we won't just be sitting on them waiting for somewhere to stick them. So
was he talking about, writing a particular scene, or just, I've got an actress to play Beverly, let's come up with a scene for her?
That was pretty much it. It was a scene that would utilize Beverly and have, her have some interaction. And we had already talked about Menard's demise. And I'm like, well, Menard, for whatever reason, his encounter with, everybody has to watch the show, but there's going to be spoilers in some of this.
For whatever reason, spoilers. But okay, here's the quick 411 on Vance's character. Menard finds this Valhalla stone, which is this strange radiation thing that exposes him to something that basically slows or really halts his aging process. So this allows the character that Vance plays to exist in the Pike era and then exist in the Kirk era, the movie era, and then be still active in Starfleet in the 24th century. And that's where the CONSTAR Chronicles takes place, and that's why you see Vance in all those different uniforms. But in Shakedown, we do discover that, and I'm going to include a link to your actual episode, so, people, if you haven't watched it yet, just go and watch it, and that way we won't spoil it for you. Have you watched it? Okay, now you're back. We're talking about it. In this episode, we discover that, I guess, the effects are wearing off. And, Vance, or Menard is starting to age, because obviously Vance is starting to age. And so he's going to eventually die. He's now back to living a normal lifespan. It's not like his advanced age of, hundreds of years is catching up with him. But, he is going to ultimately die, like we all do. And you got to write that.
Not his death, but just the revelation that, hey, you're not immortal anymore. Now,
was he okay with you writing the reveal of this is when Menard discovers that he's no longer immortal? Is he okay with you having that effect on his character?
Of course, because we already knew that he was going to die. I actually wrote this as troll service. because I've read a lot of the critiques of what Vance has put out there. And one of the things was, okay, how did you get from point A to point B? So how did Vance get from, being effectively immortal and being able to have Menard be in all these different eras, yet now all of a sudden he's going to have his death, and we're going to see the after effects of his death. And you need that segue. If you're going to be episodic and you're going to have those events, you need to have that segue. So I wrote the segue. And obviously, he read it. He said, yeah, let's do it. And we produced it. It's on YouTube now. We've got the No Budget Productions banner at the end of it. So, yeah, he was behind it.
But you pitched him the idea that, okay, I want to write an episode where X, Y, and Z happens. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So the other scene came up was a scene for Data. And I ended up working that in to the evolution of my Russo character, so that I wanted to have some mystery behind Russo. It kind of just seemed like this weird character that just kind of like starts showing up. And the behind the scenes reason for that was in Resistance, we were missing an actor. So I was a person in a chair. And we were supposed to be producing Republic. This was filmed before the guidelines. I didn't want to shave my beard off. And so it's like I'm kind of like half covering my beard in this scene. And I'm talking with this oddball accent that I kind of like just threw together from like a couple of different accents and just said, well, he's from Alpha Centauri or something.
Yeah, I was thinking I was going to ask you during this call, are you originally from like South Africa or something? Because I couldn't figure out what your accent was. But
yeah, no, it was like a little bit of French, a little bit of Italian, and a little bit of English. And it's like, okay, basically I almost modeled it after the wife on Family Guy, who's got that affected Newport, Rhode Island accent. So it was kind of like I'm more of the snotty shoreline New England person and that's kind of where it came from. That's where I grew up. Not in the Newport area, but further down in Connecticut on the snotty New England shoreline.
You can't get that, yeah.
That's where I am now, is up in rural Maine, where
they all talk like that because Petra Traum, remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So we've got, you betcha. We've got, so we had the evolution of Russo, and then, okay, all of a sudden he's the chief engineer because another actor couldn't show up, make it for something. I'm like, this is getting crazy. This guy's like been promoted like 3 times in the course of a year across these stories, and then we started talking about him having to be the exec after Menard dies. And I'm like, this guy's pretty weird. So we got to have some mystery behind him. So I end up writing the scene where analytic Data, as my day job as an analyst, sees all these weird discrepancies and is trying to make sense of it. So that ended up being the after credits scene for Shakedown. It was so goofy and so fun, but I had fun, playing with the editor and the effects and the contacts.
So apparently you use the Jedi mind trick on Data across, literally light years of space. And the question is there any callback later on to that there's something weird about your character and we learn more, or is this just one of those mysteries that we just have to, wait to...
We are going to learn more, yes.
But there's nothing out there amongst all of the, 15
Not now,
hours of binge watching right now. Okay, yeah.
No, there's ideas, but actually, it was the editor of 11th Hour that actually put the bug in my head. We were at one of the fan appreciation weekends at Kingsland, Georgia, with Neutral Zone studio sets, and he was taking pictures, and he took a picture of me with my 36-inch Enterprise model that I did up as the Republic, and he said that I looked like Gary Mitchell. And I'm like, I'm going to use that. And that's where that came from. So, spoiler, Russo is either Mitchell, or he's been through the barrier, or there's something else going on there.
Well, you were there long enough ago that you could have easily been serving with Mitchell. I don't think you could have been Mitchell. The original.
We actually did talk about getting a couple of our high school picks, because I had like the long bangs, in the 80s, and we did talk about getting a couple of our high school picks and doctoring them to look like Academy picks to indicate that Menard might have gone to the Academy with Mitchell. But we never got to work that into a scene.
Maybe you could be Mitchell's brother. Maybe if
maybe
to the riff.
Maybe.
That way you don't have to look exactly like Gary Mitchell. You could just be a little bit like Gary Mitchell.
No. So, I've got the bangs, I've got the coloring. My mouth and nose are a similar shape. I'm a little bit heavier than Gary Lockwood was back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. But
but you know what? Fans are very forgiving.
Yeah.
Except when they're not.
Well, Madison Spencer, the woman that played Crusher, she'd played Crusher for Vance before, but she also played Deanna Troi before. So, we have the same cosplay actress portraying two classic Next Generation characters in some of these films. And, why not? I'm going to criticize JJ here, but they had Benedict Cumberbatch play Khan.
Yeah. And you know what I'm going to say to that? All they had to do is to have one throwaway line where Khan says, "They even changed my face so no one would recognize me." Because that's the sort of thing Section 31 would have done. Obviously, Khan is he's a famous person from history. Anybody who read a history book would see Khan's face and say, hey, it's that same guy. So give him some plastic surgery and call him John Harris or whatever, or John Harrison, and no one's going to know, and you either make him talk with a British accent or else, somehow I'm sure that they can, alter things in the 23rd century to give somebody the ability to speak in an accent. I don't know, but, it's the kind of thing sci-fi would probably understand, but they don't even have to deal with that. But at least to somehow explain how a person who is an Indian Sikh suddenly has pasty white skin.
Right.
Would have taken them 13 seconds of movie time. That's nothing. And then people wouldn't have complained about it, but, nobody even thinks of this, so.
No, and if they did, it ended up on the cutting room floor because it didn't come across as sincere or something.
But enough bitching about J.J. Abrams. All right, so here you are. You have now convinced Vance to give you the keys to the car for a night, and you did what next? I'm guessing you wrote the script next, right?
Yeah, and it actually ended up being a two-parter. I expected we'd have 2 days of filming, and we can talk about that later. And so it was a two-parter, a bunch of scenes together, many of which Vance and I discussed trying to work into other ideas that we had for character interactions. But what I really wanted to do is address a lot of the criticism and kind of do some troll service. So my very first scene in Shakedown, once I got past, I had this little scene with Beverly. I had another scene written that we ended up not producing due to constraints. And then I went back, well, what am I going to put around this? And how is it going to, make sense? Well, one of the other things that people ask me all the time is why do you have a Constitution-class ship but you're wearing First Contact era uniforms? Well, it's a museum ship, and we've refit it, and we're trying to make do. And by the time CONSTAR takes place, the Dominion War is in full swing, and we've taken the wreck of the CONSTAR, salvaged as much as we could, taken some other ships and salvaged what we could, and basically made the CONSTAR A. So we still have Constitution-era sets to make do, so there's a lot of the initial dialogue was just around trying to satisfy that moment, right? Oh, they changed my face. Well, we didn't change the ship. And, address a few other things that people have brought up over the years, the casual clothes and, things like that. So I set it up so that we had crewmen gossiping and complaining while they're trying to finish up the shakedown tests of the new ship. which is what people do when they're working.
Yes, they do. And that was kind of fun. They're trying to figure out how old the captain is and what's going on. Some people have more information than others. And, one would think that this wouldn't necessarily be on the pamphlet, so you've joined the crew of the CONSTAR. But on the other hand, I don't think Menard has ever really made a secret about it. It's simply, it's like if you happen to, have diabetes, for example, you don't necessarily, say, hi, my name is Eric Menard, I have diabetes. Hi, my name is Eric Menard, I happen to be immortal. It's just, one of those things where if it comes up in conversation, it comes up in conversation.
Yeah. Obviously, who ended up being there was a complete surprise, so I did not know who was going to be there. There was a few actors I was hoping would be there that I wrote specifically for. We even quickly rewrote stuff to do some time constraints. We didn't have a transporter room, so I completely cut out a transporter room scene.
I think we skipped over a piece of the story, which is you're setting up for the shoot. Now, you've already written a script, and you said you didn't know who was going to be there.
Right.
How did that happen?
It was kind of we had people that had been involved over the years, and they just weren't able to commit. And then by luck, we had other people want to be involved, like Victoria Fox and Josh Irwin. And I'm like, okay, great. Fortunately, I'd written a few of the characters to be generic. The hardest one was he has a character whose name is Hoobline. And one of the ways that Vance got around having a Vulcan character without having to have him always be in Vulcan makeup was this Hoobline is a human who has an affinity towards Vulcan philosophy and the ways of logic, and he's actually gone through the Kolinahr successfully. So I originally wrote the voice of reason in that scene, stop the gossiping and stuff like that, for this character named Hoobline, and I wrote it for someone who is Vulcan or had that mentality. So he wasn't going to be able to be there. Yaffa was there, and Yaffa was going to, be acting XO. We had another scene for that. So I kind of quickly threw everything, moved things around. I was like, okay, Yaffa, you're going to have all of Hoobline's lines. And that's kind of how that happened. So we wanted to explain Nancy's absence, and we did that, and how promotions were taking place, and if Yaffa was going to be the captain in another episode, 11th Hour, we needed to explain how she went from not being even the executive officer to being the captain. So it was a perfect opportunity for us to, we knew Nancy, the character that played Nancy, the actress that played Nancy, wouldn't be able to join us. So a lot of that initial work to have that scene where Yaffa gets promoted to acting first officer was already part of the script before we went to shoot.
So how does one set up a shoot for this? I mean, I know that Vance sometimes shoots multiple episodes at the same time when he goes onto these sets. And actually, your episode had some footage that was shot at Neutral Zone Studios in Georgia, but you also had a lot of your footage from the bridge that was shot in Arkansas at the Warp 66 studios. So describe the process for people who are thinking about making a fan film. How do you set up your shoots? How do you prepare for them? How do you get people to come? You said you didn't know who was going to show up. How much preparation do you do to make sure that people are going to be there?
So fortunately, because Vance is the producer and we knew that we were going to do this at the same time as we were going to do some other stuff, just like the other 2 weekends where I joined him at first shoot, we shot about 5 films that weekend, almost all of it on Saturday last year. The year before, it was Saturday and a little bit on Sunday morning. And so it was essentially make do with what you've got when you've got it. And I followed Vance's lead on this. We didn't have the opportunity to do table reads. Everything was, pretty much ready as you see it on screen, was set up within moments before. But, I mean, I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and I'm 52 years old. I had ideas of how I wanted this to look. I knew that I wanted the dialogue to be up close, like when Sulu and Chekhov are talking. I knew that I wanted to have wide shots when the captain comes on the bridge. I knew that I wanted to have, the confrontations when they were in sick bay. I knew that I wanted to have it look a certain way. Well, the lighting was such that wouldn't work, and he didn't have a lab or an office set. So, okay, the beds have view screens. We're going to set it up there, and we did it that way. And so, just from watching Star Trek for years, I knew going there what angles I wanted to use, what framing I wanted to use, where I wanted to use the wide angle, where I didn't. I didn't know what a three-quarter set was until I saw it. And so, you got a lot tighter at some points. Or
what is a three-quarter set for those people who don't know, by the way?
Okay, so Warp 66 Studios, which is Glenn Wolfe and Dan Reynolds out in Arkansas, they have this old schoolhouse that was Dan's radio station operated out of, and they have like an old classroom that has basically the station that's next to Spock's station, the science station at the back of the bridge, all the way around to the two stations that are almost like 1.5 stations past the engineering station where Scotty would sit on the other side of the turbolift doors. So you only have this crescent of the background part of the bridge. Then you have the captain's chair and the con, and within a foot or two of the outside wall of this building is the helm, which is the double-seated console where Chekhov and Sulu would sit, and where we had Victoria and Benjamin sit.
So it's not like filming in a whole nice 360-degree bridge. You really only have, I guess, about 90 degrees of arc?
Yeah, pretty much the whole, when in the opening of Shakedown, after the walkthrough scene that we filmed in Georgia, that was just, we were going to use it wherever. And it just ended up, when we discussed doing Shakedown, I'm like, I want to use the walkthrough at the beginning of Shakedown because it'd be perfect background for the engineer's log. So that's how that happened. Then when we cut to the bridge, that whole pan, that is the length of the set. That is the entire set. Is that first introductory pan of the bridge, the establishing shot. And I did it with a wide-angle lens to make it look bigger. And then I zoomed in the editor to cut out where you could see over the top of the walls.
Which leads me to my next question. So you said that you kind of mapped this out beforehand and that you knew the kinds of shots that you wanted going in. And then you discovered exactly how little space you had.
Yep.
How much did you know about lenses and photography and focal lengths and wide angles versus telephotos and that sort of thing before coming into all this?
Very little. Thank God for modern technology and autofocus and auto balance. Vance works primarily on his phone. I have a new grandson, and I'm like, well, let me look at new video cameras. I found a really cheap package that came with all that. And I played with it a little bit before we went out to film, so I knew what the difference between the lenses and filters were. I ended up not using any of the filters, and what the settings on the camera would do. And that was pretty much it. My dad was a huge photographer. We've had, video cameras and movie cameras. I used to do stop motion with a Super 8 in my Legos when I was like a little kid. So I've been around it, but I was never educated in it, and I never really pursued it as a hobby. So that could explain a few things. But these are amateur films, right?
Yes, amateur films. I was going to say that the thing about fan films is, and I have to point this out to people, with the exception of CBS and Paramount, there are no fan film police who are going to arrest you if you get something wrong. I mean, there are fans who will tear you apart on social media, but...
And I invite them to go out and try.
Well, you know what? I'm trying to prepare my own son for social media, and I did this when he was younger. And I said, he was 5 years old. He actually had some bullies back in pre-kindergarten, believe it or not.
Oh wow!
He was okay with them. He introduced me once. He said, "These are my bullies." They were in kindergarten, and there were 3 of them. But I knew that growing up, I mean, certainly, as he approaches social media, he's not on there yet. He's going to have to deal with, the same stuff that Vance has to deal with, that I have to deal with, that Alec Peters has to deal with, that you have to deal with. There are people out there who are very brave when all they have to do is think of some nasty thing to say into their keyboard. And so when Jaden was younger, I said, "All right, Jaden, I just dropped a rock on your head." Of course, I hadn't really, but I said, "No, I just dropped a rock on your head. Does it hurt?" "You didn't do that, Daddy." I said, No, I did. I just told you. I dropped the rock on your head. It kind of hurt. Like, "You didn't drop a rock on my head." I think, "But I just said I did." "But you didn't." And I said, "Ah." So just saying it doesn't make it true.
Right. That's a lot more widespread because of social media right now. The protection of being behind your keyboard and, no consequences.
Yeah, I mean, behind the keyboard or in the Oval Office or whatever, it's just easy to type in an insult. And it took me a long time to develop my own way of dealing with that. The old sticks and stones can break my bones, it was only working to a certain extent because there's this negativity. It's negative energy. It's out there. I mean, no matter how many times you read people calling you slow lane and say, well, that's just a word, there's negative energy behind it. There's vitriol. There's hatred, whatever there is. So that enters your life. And a friend of mine told me once, he said, in an office environment, when you're with a group and everybody's positive and there's one person who's negative, it's like dropping a single drop of black paint into a bucket of pure white paint. And you will never, no matter what you do, have pure white again. You can add as much pure white as you want to it, and that little bit of black is just going to darken it, just enough. And what I realized is that the negative energy that I saw online was like that. It was that dark drop of paint into it, and just one nasty comment could just ruin my entire day. Yeah. And ultimately, and it took me months and months of dealing with the detractors to come to this realization, it also works in the reverse, which is if you can glom onto a really positive comment, that's the white drop of paint that will keep the black from being completely black. So what I started doing whenever I would see the negative comments from the detractors, whether it was 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or whatever, is I would always have one of my recent supportive comments in my head waiting to go. And instead of giving the detractor comments all of the power, what I did was I gave that positive comment all of the power in my mind. And it would lift me out of whatever darkness I had been taken into. And there are so many wonderful positive comments. I mean, that's one of the things about fan films is that for all of the a-holes out there who are being absolute jerks, there are good people who are going to support you. And when Vance makes his fan films and the actors aren't particularly gifted thespians and, they haven't necessarily gone through Starfleet hardcore physical training.
Oh, we get a lot of criticism for that.
Yeah,
But I mean, we're real people. I mean, we don't have a studio paying us to work out 8 hours a day for 5 weeks before we film.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where
Chris Pratt, talk about how he had to prepare for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yeah, but just look at people like Christian Bale recently, who I don't know how much weight he lost. I think it was like 50 or 60 pounds. He wasn't even starting, he wasn't even 250 pounds to start off with. For him, losing 50 or 60 pounds is like a third of his body mass. But
yeah, he's down to like some ridiculous low percentage for Richer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so. Some people will do that. For Interlude,
I paid a lot of money to do that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, in case of Interlude, I just cast very thin people. We had a lot of extras, who showed up, and we specifically were looking for people of a particular body type. But that being said, we had some people who were a little heftier, and in some cases, I was thinking, oh, let's definitely film them from the shoulders up. But nobody got kicked off the set for this. But the people who were in the main roles, were all trim actors and actresses. But that was a choice that I made with Interlude, along with Josh and Victoria, that we wanted to look like a real Starfleet crew. We wanted to have that same believability as Axanar does. But when you've got Vance and some of these other series like Dominion and the Potemkin series, they don't have that same bar that they set for themselves, which is fine because it allows so many more people to play in the sandbox. So
that's exactly it. That is exactly it. And so, one of the things that I find, it's like Discovery, I think, got a lot of criticism for some of their casting choices and their costuming choices. And it took me a while to realize this when I was going back and watching Voyager or Enterprise, and you see Jerry Ryan or Jolene Blaylock and the way they're costumed. And then you go look at, the ensemble, a wonderful ensemble on Discovery. It's a smarter choice to show real people with real body types. The tall, lanky girl, the slightly chunky, socially awkward girl, a real middle-aged woman. It's a smart choice to do that because these are real people.
It's a smart choice to do that, but God, I mean, Mary Weissman has probably got to be cursing whoever designed those tight-fitting costumes because...
No, I think everybody should be cursing who designed those costumes. But that's
I mean, it's and there's no way fans that are my size can wear a Discovery uniform. Not that I would.
No.
But I can pull off a Next Gen outfit. It's all nice and black.
Thank God for color blocking.
Exactly. It's so slick.
Jonathan Frakes and Michael Dorn, had it made. Michael Dorn had the extra padding to make his chest look bigger, and Jonathan Frakes could age gracefully as long as he wasn't in profile.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually mistaken for Jonathan Frakes, by the way.
I noticed that you do have that likeness. Yes, your profile picture, the pre-beard Jonathan Frakes. Yes.
Yes, well, actually, no. I had the beard at the time. I had a Riker beard, and it was when Star Trek: The Experience was still in Las Vegas, and I was wearing my red TNG tunic, even though I had captain rank on it at the time. I don't think the person really knew, but this woman came up to me and she said, "I really enjoyed you in Star Trek: The Next Generation." And I was like, "Well, thank you."
I don't remember that, but thanks.
Does he really think that Jonathan Frakes is hanging out here in the corner of Quark's Bar and Restaurant? I mean, the fact is we both named Jonathan, so easily.
There's that as well. Yes.
But anyway, all right. Once again, let's get back to your fan film because I want to get an idea of what happened while you were directing these people. How did you, as the director, you're the writer, you're the director, you're the editor, you're producer, you basically control everything on this. How did you get the performances out of the people that you wanted to get?
I'd say the lines kind of like how I imagined them being said and get a few takes out of the actors, and the best one won. I had done theater in high school, not as much as I would have liked because my parents couldn't afford to buy pages in the programs. But, I did a little bit of theater in my first attempt at college, and then I took theater electives when I completed college. I did workshops over the years. So I've played with directing, and I've been in those types of workshops for stage. So that really wasn't that much different for me. But I hadn't done it in anything that was going to be a final product other than acting. So when I found out that Victoria had been a background actress on Salem and some other stuff, it's like, oh, I'm a directorial actress, and here I am, this amateur guy. And Josh said, this is fun. Don't worry about it. This is fun for us, and you're doing fine. So, okay. I just kept going.
Yeah, don't stop. And the thing about Victoria, she's a director as well. She directed Interlude.
Yeah.
And her method of directing is very much not to tell the actors how she wants them to read the lines, but instead to sort of guide them, to a better performance. So I was sort of curious how she, as an actor, was reacting to you say, okay, this is how I want you to read the line. Was she just like, okay, I'll read it that way?
Yeah, I would have liked to have had table reads, to be honest. If we're doing something that I had complete control over and had the commitments and all of that, I would have, done the table reads. I would have adjusted the scripts appropriately for things, the way people delivered certain lines, so it sounded more natural for them. It would have been a lot more technical as I was trained than flying by the seat of your pants.
But you just didn't have the time to
It didn't have the time. Again, not having commitments until, very close to the shoot. And also, these were going to fit in with the rest of Vance's stuff, and I didn't really, it didn't really make sense to try to do anything terribly different that he wasn't game for doing.
But he was fine with everything you did. Did he get involved?
The writing, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he kind of let me do my own thing once he let me go with it. We initially had talked about maybe directing one of his, and then, it turned into, okay, I'm doing the whole thing start to finish. And
so he really did just give you
he trusted it. He trusted. Yeah.
He got in the back seat, said, drive me around. He didn't even tell you, hey, you're going too fast and make a left.
Yeah, they were actually working on something else and filming a couple other scenes while we were doing the bridge scenes upstairs. So, yeah.
Because there isn't a lot of Vance in your in your fan film. He's there in some scenes, but obviously, I
right.
noticed that he wasn't there in a lot of it.
Yeah. So, we kind of wanted to be, okay, we're wrapping everything up. He's probably got a lot of paperwork to do. We're getting everything ready to go before, the big push. And I wanted to have those scenes where it was, the after hours scenes or, the business as usual stuff. I did want to have an event, the rescuing of the refugees, but my friend that was going to play the captain of the freighter wasn't going to be able to come. And we were running out of daylight fast and had some lighting challenges on set at Glenn's studios that weren't 100% yet at Glenn sets. So we kind of cut some stuff and went back later and did a pickup scene with Vance in his ready room, which he filmed at his house. So to kind of cover that, and my wife did the voice of the nurse because Michael, who played our doctor, was very sick. So my wife read the doctor's lines as though she was the nurse.
I love it how fan films just kind of throw things together. It's just like, okay, we don't have this person, we'll use this person. And even Axanar, which, is trying to get on a whole different level. There was an actor who showed up in October who just, unfortunately, just lost a parent, was not able to perform properly, and he had an awful weekend. And Paul Jenkins was telling me that he wasn't delivering his lines properly, and Paul, as the director, knew that he just wasn't going to get what he needed out of this guy. And so what Paul did was he went home that night, stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning, rewriting the script to give the important lines that this one actor had to do to other characters, just so they had coverage. And then ultimately, this actor said, look, I'm so sorry. I realize I'm just not getting it, and I'm not, I'm just too much in my head. And things are not going well for me this weekend. And they're ultimately bringing him back in February to basically reshoot his scenes. But, just in case that couldn't happen, Paul was able to get other people to read those lines so that they would have coverage. And so, things go wrong all the time in fan films. And, the creative ways that we find around it, my hat is off to you and all the other fan filmmakers who pretty much, find the duct tape when they have to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I like diving in feet first and, taking on pretty much everything. That's why I ended the film with the quote from, I believe it was Star Trek II, for everything there's a first time. Because literally for everything there's a first time. I made my first costume. The coveralls that I wore was my first garment that I've ever made. So, yes, I know where every flaw is on that. But you know what? I made a garment.
Congratulations.
My first screenplay ever. I've toyed with the idea over my lifetime, but never really completed anything. Filmed, directed, edited, played with special effects, using editing transitions for clever effects, and overdubbing audio. We had Madison's lines recorded months before we shot. We weren't going to get the actor to play the doctor, so we switched to Dr. Chilcott, played by Michael Sylvester. So I had originally written this for this generic Dr. Smith, nodding to Lost in Space. So Madison's mouth is saying Smith, but we got there to overdub. We got to do the voiceover over saying Dr. Chilcott. So I'm, lining up, new dialogue with mouth movements and stuff. We filmed in the spring. I think I had it fully edited like in October or early November.
And you'd never edited before either?
Never edited before either.
You did a pretty good job editing, I have to say. I have to give you kudos to, keeping the pacing and, some of the stuff is, I noticed that little bit of voiceover and, sometimes you can't match it because the person just says Smith and, you just don't have it. But in general, I think, you did a really great job. Obviously, it took you a while. What application were you using to edit it?
I was using Pinnacle. So, and obviously not having edited before, I never used Pinnacle before either. So a good chunk of my summer was learning how to do that.
In the editing, did you also do adjustments to, lighting and color levels and sound levels, or were you?
I did sound levels, definitely. In fact, there's a few that I couldn't do very well that I, in retrospect, wished I had gotten, to recapture the line closer up. But yeah, no, I definitely had to do sound levels. But lighting, I tried playing with a little bit. Color correction, I tried playing with a little bit. But it just wasn't giving me the effects I wanted. And I was doing a lot of it on my laptop, which is about 8 years old. And it crashed a lot.
Oh, boy.
So about the beginning of October, I ended up redoing everything on the living room computer. I had to get a new computer for my living room because the old one died, and I just installed Pinnacle on there, and I just started completely over with as few layers as possible. So yeah, no, I'd never done green screen work before. I'd never done transitions. My wife was extremely helpful to make sure that the beats between lines weren't too far apart. I spent a lot of time getting the dialogue closer together.
No, it's appreciated, and what I mean by that is a lot of times in fan films, more is less. They often say less is more, but more is sometimes less. A lot of people film more than they need, and they don't necessarily trim it. So, you watch fan films, and a lot of times, okay, we don't necessarily need to see this or that, but it's there, and once again, I celebrate all fan films, so I don't complain about this stuff. It's part of the process. But when I see a tight edit, I appreciate it for a number of reasons. First of all, it makes the episode more watchable. And second, it also means that I don't have to spend as much of my life watching stuff that really isn't necessary in order to get to the good stuff. There's so many fan films to watch these days. And I spend a lot of time sitting and watching, slow scenes or scenes where, really could have cut here or cut there. It's sort of like, how much of your life do you spend sitting in traffic? You can't do anything about it, but you really wouldn't like the traffic to move faster. So, I appreciate the fact that, you spent the time, tightening the shots and the dialogue. And like I said, it came out, I think, as a really good edit when all was said and done. And I guess the last question about post-production is the visual effects. Now, I'm guessing you supervised those from whoever was doing it? Or did you do those yourself?
So that is a story unto itself. Obviously, I had a lot more ideas. I think everyone does because sci-fi is very special effects intensive. I wanted to have people beaming over from the shuttle before it exploded, or the freighter before it exploded. I kind of wanted, what I got wasn't exactly what I wanted, but there was so much else going on for the other productions. Vance couldn't ask for more. So it was definitely a make it work moment. The only new shot that was done for this was the shot of the Cardassian ship chasing the freighter. Everything else, all the flybys, were stock from stuff that Vance had already had done. So that's why there was a couple people credited for the special effects. And, again, I have to say, I watched a lot of Star Trek as a kid. They reused flybys and things
all the time. Just change the color of the planets.
You even see the different filming models in the same episode. So taking that lead from classic Trek, I reused those shots.
Good enough for Rod Ferry.
I would zoom. Right. I would zoom in tighter in a couple places, trim it differently. The shot of the CONSTAR firing on the Cardassian ship, I actually skewed it so it looked like the CONSTAR was coming in at an angle, so it would look somewhat different. So a lot of that was stock. I said, okay, Vance, what have you got that I can try to use for transitions? And he dumped a bunch of stuff up on Drive Space, and I just picked through it, picked what I liked for different things. The final warp thing it wasn't the ship warping out. It was just the ship moving through space. So I'm like, okay, I used the editor where you can make the frame small. I wanted to try to get it to stretch, but that just wasn't working right. I was trying to do a trapezoid thing, and it just wasn't working right. So I just kind of made it zoom out faster. And because the CONSTAR's engines are supposedly different, added a flash to it and added the warp sound, and hey, it's warping out.
Looks fine. Looks fine. Nothing to worry about.
So, right. So it was a lot of creativity, and all the transition flybys were stock. So I didn't have to have a lot. I wanted more of the freighter being chased, and I wanted to show the freighter blowing up. I wasn't able to make that work with what I had. At one point, I think I even engaged another CG artist. Never got back to me. He said he'd do it and never got back to me.
I hate it when that happens.
To try to get, the warp effect. And I found something online that was free for use if we gave them credit. So one of the warp scenes is just a still of the main view screen we picked up from another one of Vance's films, and I just put over what had been on the view screen with the warp field starting, and added noise, and that was that. So, yeah, obviously what I saw in my head when I was writing that, I wanted the Next Generation style stretch to the vanishing point with the flash and everything, and yeah, it didn't happen.
Sometimes you have to take what you can get.
Exactly, and I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from everything I attempted on this. Is one of the shows I watch is Project Runway. I hate reality television, I'll say that, but I like where it's the creativity is the reality and not, just like the old CBS show where people would sit around the house and be catty with each other. But, I mean, these people actually have to stand on making things. And Tim Gunn, who was an instructor at the art school in New York City where they used to have the show filmed, his line was make it work. And this effort is definitely make it work. Little to no budget, filming shots for a bunch of different films on the same day, not knowing what how complete the sets were because they were in the process of being built, not having exactly the lighting we wanted, not having people that we thought we might have 6 months earlier when we were writing. All of these are challenges for amateur productions, especially when you're trying to get people from all over the country, to co-locate somewhere in Arkansas.
And in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas. I mean, some people understand that the sets that Glenn and Dan have available, they're great sets, but they are quite literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, if you fly into even, like, say, Fayetteville, you're like 2.5 hours away, right?
Yeah, I flew into Little Rock the second time, and that was about 2 to 3 hours. Then, funny story, driving between Little Rock and Mountain Home, there's a little coffee shop with a beautiful scenic overlook. The girl that runs it grew up in the town next door to the town I grew up in Madison. I grew up in Guilford, Connecticut. She grew up in Madison, Connecticut, and I meet her literally in the middle of nowhere in northern Arkansas. But the first time I couldn't get a flight into Little Rock, and I flew into Memphis, and that was a 5-hour drive across nowhere.
That's one of the reasons that not necessarily everybody is showing up at your shoots.
Yeah. But Michael drove from Alabama. Vance and Ken Edwards, they came down from Kansas and Missouri. So, yeah, people do it. That's how much we love doing this, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if you make Star Trek fan films, you might be crazy, but you also got a lot of love in your heart.
Yeah, and it is a lot of fun, and it is a community, and it is a family, and I love seeing everybody year to year, and it makes it worthwhile. It's like the fate of the universe isn't hanging on whether or not this thing gets produced well or not, and nobody's going to lose money over it, and it's a good experience.
It's one of those things where if you ever have the opportunity to try to make a Star Trek fan film or even work on a Star Trek fan film, there's really nothing else like it. Now that I've really experienced it, from different directions and such, it's such an amazing experience to be creating this as a team. It's not just one person, unless it's just one person, but the camaraderie, the teamwork, everything works because you're operating as a unit, you're trusting each other, you're relying on each other to do the best jobs you possibly can. And it doesn't always happen, but how you react to that and how you react to the adversity and how you react to things that go wrong, and can you still land the plane even with one engine out and the landing gear's not coming down? Can you still get the thing down when you finally have the fan film? That's really the best feeling. And I'm guessing that's why I want my last question to you to be is like, you were finally done with it. And how did you feel?
It was mixed, because obviously it wasn't my vision, right? I did want to do a 2-parter. I wanted to have more than just, we rescued him and everybody died. But what I was able to do and create that transition and add to the CONSTAR story and try to address a lot of the questions that people have asked me at Treklanta or online over the years. It was a lot of fun. And, I mean, these people are my friends, and I made new friends in Josh Victoria, I like to think. And it was a good time. It was a way to spend a weekend. I just wish everybody was closer so we could do it more often. Winter aside, I do love the Northeast. If I had a way to be in Georgia more often and work with them, or go out and work with Glenn more often, I definitely would. Randy Landers just moved to Kentucky, so I really wish, maybe there's an opportunity now that he's closer than the middle of Alabama for me to, work with him on a film. So it's great that I'm in a position where I can do this occasionally. I can use my business travel airline miles to fly, and I'm not a huge drinker, and there aren't a lot of new model kits coming out. So, this is my vice.
As long as your wife is understanding, you're fine.
There's that.
Greg, I want to thank you very, very much for taking some time to share your experiences with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I was actually like, why the hell do you want to talk to me? But yeah, it was an experience. And I'm not going to say I'm going to challenge everybody out there, but I'm going to invite everybody out there who says, God, I want to do fan films. Do it. Watch what Vance has done. If you want to see what somebody can do with little to nothing, get together with some friends, have a good time. A lot of the people that Vance has in these films are people that come up to him and say, hey, I'd like to be in a film. And he'd put a small story or part of the story that would involve them and then bring them back time and time again. And the larger fan productions that are out there, these people wouldn't have that opportunity. Not being, going to an art school where they can work on, film production or theater. This gives them that opportunity to try that out. And it's awesome. Not everything has to be at the caliber of Renegades or Star Trek Continues. These are amateur fan films. Don't be intimidated. Do it. Use your cell phone. You don't have to go out and buy a $200 camera kit like I did. Use your cell phone. Apple is making ads now and encouraging people to film on their phones and send them the films because they want to show off how good their cameras have gotten. It's YouTube has editing software built in. You don't necessarily even need to buy some $100 software package.
I just use iMovie.
Or iMovie, yeah. So it's just really, it's a lot more accessible than I think most people think it is. I've said that at the panels in Turklana, sitting right next to Alec Peters, and it's like, I think the guidelines are good because the constraints are such that anybody can do a 15-minute film now that no one can do a 2-hour film.
Yeah, part of the good news about nobody doing a 2-hour film is once again, it's that old sitting in traffic thing. Is that I can watch my fan films faster.
Yes, and you get to see more of the variety that's out there as well.
You can do a lot in 15 minutes and a half an hour even. I mean, I realize that, yes, we loved our 48-minute and hour-long Star Trek Continues episodes. But for the most part, if you can do it in 30 or even 35 minutes, there's nothing to be ashamed of about that, and there's nothing to be frustrated about. One of the things that the folks at Dreadnought Dominion did with one of their episodes is they took a longer episode, Redemption at Red Medusa, and they chopped it into 2 smaller episodes because they had a feature-length fan film with a B story, and they just pulled out the B story, and the B story became the heist. You can do that. You don't necessarily need a 48-minute long Star Trek episode. And once again, it's a lot of work to do 48 minutes to an hour. So, if you're just getting into this, tackle a 10 or 15-minute story. See what happens. Yeah, use your cell phone. Use your friend's cell phone or get a decent camera. But whatever you want to do, the thing about fan films is there's guidelines, but there's no rules. Do whatever you want. Right.
Well, I want to quote Ray Tuffy. He's the one that really made me look at it. Rod Serling with Twilight Zone, 24 minutes and 2 acts. He tells a complete story. Watch the old Twilight Zones. Get a feeling of that pace. Get a feeling of how much they focus on just the story and there is no B story, and how they do the resolution, how they do the climax, how they do the denouement. Study what other people do. A really good example for the 15-minute mark, cartoons, Adventure Time, Invader Zim, they tell complete stories in 12 minutes.
Very, very true.
Any of those cartoons that do SpongeBob, they do 2 stories in a half hour. Granted, we're not entertaining 4-year-olds, but we've study what other people do. I mean, I'm not trained for film. I've just watched a lot of television. I had a really decent story in 24 minutes. It was 24 pages. It was a decent story. Yeah, I didn't get to do all of it, but it had everything that you saw plus the action and event that would have carried it. And that, unfortunately, those are the pieces that I had to cut. I'm not going to say don't criticize, because I guarantee you, Vance and I know every flaw in every one of the films that we've worked on. Yeah, if you feel the need, go for it. But I have a much deeper appreciation for it, having attempted it myself.
Yeah, once you've had the experience of doing it, it's a whole other perspective. So let me ask you one last question, which is, what is next for you in fan films? Do you have plans to direct and write and or produce and or edit another CONSTAR Chronicles or something else in the future?
I'm not so sure about editing. I might. You never know. I might not try to tackle something so strong. I had thought of doing like a character piece, like another segue piece. There will be more CONSTAR Chronicles. We're working on some ideas, but obviously, we're not going to be able to get everything into one film. So, and there's going to be other things that pop up that Vance will do, and who knows, we might have another 50 films next year. If I feel like there needs to be something to help move the story, because one of the things that we are doing is we do have the recurring characters, and we are episodic, but we are certainly not competition for CBS. So yeah, there will be something else from me in the future, hopefully. The other thing is I want to get back together with the Republic production team and see something happen with that. The biggest challenge with Republic was taking Ray and Don's original 6-episode story and trying to condense it to 30 minutes. And we did exactly what you were talking about earlier, get rid of all the B stories and stuff like that. And here it is 4 years later, so we still have some of the original cast members have commitments and are willing to be part of it. We've gotten some people we originally thought we'd like to have involved but couldn't be in the beginning. And other people have moved on. And also with now the sets being in Georgia versus Oklahoma, I have some ideas of how to include some of the original cast members on one of one of my trips often takes me in the Dallas area. So if I extend that trip, we might be able to get some outdoor filming done. And so we've got some ideas for Republic, and I'd like to see that actually come to completion and have our 30-minute 2-part story, which would take Ray's and Don Horan's original 6-episode arc and get it down to just the adventure.
Well, cool.
And, who knows? You might see me show up as an extra, and I'm an extra in one of Glenn's already. You might see me in something that Randy's puts together here someday. So,
yeah, another Where's Waldo of Star Trek fan films.
Exactly. I don't think I'll ever get as many as Vance or Larry Fleming, but they're a lot of fun to do, and when I can take part, I will.
We all have our goals.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you, and best of luck, and I'll be looking for you in other fan films in the future.
Definitely. Hope we can chat soon.
Okay, thank you, my friend.
Take care.